Good afternoon, painters. My name is Olivia, and I teach monthly painting classes at the Hardin County Public Library, usually once a month. And due to the circumstances, we're going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to be delivering my class online here. And so this is the painting we're going to be focusing on this time. I know the Derby's been postponed, but hopefully we'll all still be celebrating a little bit. So trying to get in that headspace here. And so we're only going to need a few things. It's going to work a lot like the classes that I usually do if you've ever taken one. You'll kind of know the process. If not, it's okay, super easy. So what's going to happen is I'm going to show you one step of the painting. You're going to do it, then I'm going to do the next step, you're going to do it, so forth. All right. So we're only going to need a couple things for this painting. You're going to need some clean water to clean your brushes, some rags or paper towels, a couple of brushes. I have a ton here. You really only need, let's see, some, I'll say large size brush, probably 1.5 inches or bigger. If you have a big house brush like this, you can definitely use that one too. You would need a, I'll say medium sized brush, anywhere from something like this, like 1 inch or smaller, can be something like that, something like this, round, square, doesn't really matter. Anything like these guys, kind of a medium shape, medium size. And lastly, you'll want a smaller guy, some kind of detail brush, can be any shape or size, something like this, so we can do the little details. But other than that, you're going to need some paint, something to put your paint on. If you have one of these guys that you can put your paint on, you can certainly go do that. I'm not going to use this today because I don't think I'll have enough room to mix all of the colors that I want in just these little pockets. So what I actually did was I just covered a piece of cardboard and wrapped some tinfoil around it so that I could put my paint on here because it won't soak into the cardboard with the foil on the top. So if you have like a paper plate, we use paper plates for the paintings usually. I don't have any of those at my house, so just kind of come up with what you got in your house. So something like this, a paper plate, you can wrap a regular, like a dinner plate in foil or saran wrap, anything like that that's not going to be absorbent. You can throw your paint on. So all of our colors today we're going to be mixing with primaries. This is something that I usually get, just these big, let's see, they are, I don't know how many ounces. So I usually get a big set of paints like these, just primaries. I got the black and the white, red, yellow, and 2 blues. And with these you can make any color. I also have my blow dryer over here. If you've ever taken my class, you know that this is really important when you're in a classroom setting, but it's not as important today because we're doing this pre-recorded class here. So if we're doing a part and I say to go ahead and blow dry, you can always just wait a little bit and let yours air dry. There's kind of a no time limit on this class because you can start and stop and rewind and go at your own pace, which is going to be the benefit of this kind of class. So there's always a silver lining, right? So we are going to start by taking our big brush, whichever that means for you. It can be a big house brush like this, or it can be, I think this is either 1.5 or 2 inch brush, whatever you want. And we're going to start in our background, and we are going to be moving towards the foreground. That's always how I do my classes. It's just easier than trying to tuck things back into the background that you've already put in there. So we're going to be starting with the sky. We're going to go in with the blue, and we're going to put some clouds in there. We're then going to come into the buildings, the little twin spires that we all know so well. And then we're going to work on our figure. So, shake up my paint here. We're going to start by making the sky color. So a little white, a little blue to make some sky blue. It kind of depends on how dark your blue is, the ratio that we're going to use here. But I'll kind of show you what I'm doing here. And this is a little trial and error too. You never really know what you're going to come out with until you do it. So I'm going to go a little bit darker than that. So when you're doing this class, I highly recommend that you wear some old clothes that you don't mind getting paint on. Acrylic is notoriously hard from getting out of fabrics, so don't paint on your super nice rug, don't paint on your very nice tablecloth, don't paint with your favorite shirt on. I do not recommend. I've been there. Alright. So I used a little bit of a different shade of blue than I did in our original painting, so it's going to be a little bit different. A little bit of a different color. This is more of like kind of a robin's egg. That's a little bit more of like a blue-green color, but that's okay. Whatever you have, again, works. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to paint, I'm going to say 2/3 of this canvas with our sky color. So from here up, we're going to paint with our blue, and we're just going to cover the whole thing solid. Just going for coverage here. And now when you're doing your background colors, you're going to want to paint your left and your right sides of the canvas. So over here, the right side too. You can do the top and the bottom. You don't need to. If you want to, you can certainly do that. I suggest doing it as you go instead of going back and trying to guess the color that you were using and things like that. But definitely I would say do the left and the right at the very least, because then when you hang it up, you're going to have those nice pretty finished edges. Alright. So we have our sky. Just a full coverage of this blue. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of our white, so I'm going to take just a touch of my white. I'm going to use the same brush that I used to put the sky color on. I'm not going to rinse it, I'm going to leave the blue on here. If you have a lot of color on there, you can kind of just squeegee it off onto your canvas here. But dip into your white just a tiny bit. Doesn't have to be a lot, that maybe even is too much. Something like that. And we're going to go into our clouds. And so what I don't recommend is doing the bubbly, lumpy clouds. It's a little not as realistic. So all I recommend that you do is take a little bit of this white, and you're going to kind of swirl it in. We're not going so much for a defined cloud, so you don't want it to be super stark white against this nice blue sky. You're going to kind of just blend it in here. And since your blue paint is still wet, this white should work in here nicely. And these clouds can go off the edge of the page. You don't need to stick to just putting them right in the middle. Because if you think about it, we're looking at a scene that's larger than our canvas, so not all of the clouds would be restricted to being inside the canvas. And so I think that's about good for me. A little more in this guy. You don't want our clouds too bright. You don't want to take away from the main subject matter here. Just a little bit to get us a little bit of variety in that background. And so I'm going to take this brush now, I'm going to throw it in my water, which I have back here. And I'm going to pull out my black, and we're going to get working on the buildings. So we're just going to use plain black for this. No need to mix. You're going to use quite a bit of it, so give yourself a nice little pile. And we're going to use some of it later too, so if you have some left over, no big deal. And so you're going to take that same brush that you had. So let me just clean this off so that we're all on the same page. When you're cleaning your brush, you always want to dip it down into the bottom, kind of press it against that bottom of your cup. That way it gets all the paint out of the top of the brush, especially if you're using a big brush like this. Sometimes the paint gets trapped, see, like this, gets trapped up here, and then your brush isn't actually clean. So we'll get as much of that out as we can. Also, always try to dry your brush with the brush head facing down. If you do this and you dry it like this, sometimes the water runs into this metal part of the brush, and then when you go to paint, you go like this, all the water comes out, and then you have a runny mess. So it doesn't need to be completely blow dried or anything like that. Just give it a good squeeze, and you should be good to go. All right. So now what we're going to do, we are going to take our black paint, and we're going to paint the rest of the canvas that is white right now. So anything from this line down is going to be painted plain black. Don't worry about the line where it meets your sky. If it's a little wonky right now, we're going to fix it later with our medium-sized brush. So right now we're taking our large-sized brush, and we're just filling in that bottom part. Okay. Now if you're already working with more of a medium-sized brush, then you can stick with the one that you have. But since we're going to be starting on some of the spires and things like that, which are going to be a little bit smaller, I know that this brush is going to be too big for me. So I'm going to size down to one that's this size. So if this one's 2 inches, maybe this one's like 1 inch. So if you want to size down, now is definitely the time to do that. If you feel like you can do it with the brush that you have, you can certainly keep going. We're just going to be sticking with the black, so if you want to keep going with that brush, you can. If you want to change it up right now, you could do that. It can be round or square, it doesn't really matter at this point. So like I said, we're going to stick with our plain black, and we're going to start to put our spires on here. So all we're going to start with is the top point, I'll say. We're not going to do the little thin guy just yet. We're going to start with the kind of triangular roof, and then we're going to come down into the building part. And so what you want to do is you kind of want to identify here where you want the top of the bigger spire to be. So this point right here. And so you don't really want it to go off the top of the page. If the left side of your spire roof kind of pokes out the edge of this canvas, that's totally okay. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll put a dot where I think the roof is going to start, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to make that roof shape. And so it's not a perfect triangle that we're making, it's more of a, I'm going to say a witch hat shape. So it's going to come down straight like a triangle, and then when you get to the bottom, it's going to angle out a little bit more, you see on that guy. So you're going to do skinny triangle to start, you're going to widen that angle a little bit, and then bring it straight in. So you're going to want something like that. Alright. And now we're going to do the exact same thing with the second one. One should be a little bit bigger than the other one. It doesn't have to be the one on the left that's bigger. It can be either one. If you have one that you've already done that's smaller, that looks really good, don't change it. You can make the other one bigger, vice versa. So we'll just do that same thing that we did before. It helps to stagger the heights of them a little bit. You don't want them both at the exact same height because it's going to look kind of stale. So try to do one a little bit taller than the other one. Again, it doesn't have to be the one on the left that's taller. You can do whichever one you want, whatever you feel like you have room for. So I think I want the top of my second one to be there. I'm going to come down. Come over like that. All right, a little rough at this point, but that's okay. We're going to clean them up. Okay, then from here we're going to keep doing the rest of the buildings. We're going to come to the little angle where we started to widen the roofs, and that's where we're going to drop our building down. So imagine it's coming right from here where we changed that angle. Same thing on this big eye. So right here, kind of where we change direction, is going to be the spot for our buildings. And then I'm just going to continue this on. I angled this part a little bit over here. If you wanted to go straight across, you certainly could do that. Just thought this gave the building a little bit of variety. And we're going to come across with our building. Here's the time that if you want to do anything a little different with the buildings, if you want there to be another little roof top here, you can do that. If you want it to drop down a little bit over here, you can do that too. If you want to give this a little differentiation, you can certainly do that. Just keep in mind that our woman with the hat is going to cover a lot of this part that we're doing. So don't get too caught up in doing crazy stuff in here because you're probably not going to see it. So all we're going to do right now is this outlined portion that is painted in blue. So everything in here, including these guys, that's all going to get painted in black right now. So just plain black, this small brush. If you still can't get in those corners or get those nice clean lines with this medium-sized brush, you can definitely size down to your smaller one. What I would suggest is use this bigger brush to fill in a majority of the space. So if you can get to a place where you're like this, where you're mostly filled in, and then you want to take this little guy and fill in the little spaces, you can certainly do that. And like I said, in this online format, you can take all the time that you need. If you want to get these nice perfect lines, that's totally okay. Go at your own pace. Feel free to pause wherever you need to, and just get this guy nice and filled in. Okay, so our next step is going to be finishing the spire parts of the spire. And so what we're going to do is we'll take our small brush. If you haven't already picked this one up to finish your spires, you can pick this one up right now. We're going to dip into just the same plain black we've been using. We're going to put a little cross platform at the top of each of these spires. So it's maybe a ½ inch or so, depending on the size of the canvas you use. You're just going to come right across the top. 2 little platforms, and then from here, you're going to shoot straight up from each of these and make your little point. If your tall spire goes off the top of the page, that's totally okay. You want to try to get these as thin as you can, so if you have an even smaller brush than this, I would say go for that one. They don't need to be crazy small, they don't need to be crazy tall. Mine are maybe 1 inch tall over there, so give that a try. I'm going to pull this down because I don't know if I can do it over there. Okay, so at this point, we're going to use the blow dryer and dry everything that we have on here, especially the edges. If you have, sometimes I find that when you're painting over the edge, you get globs of paint on the sides here. So make sure you dry all the way over here, all the way on this side, just so you don't stick your hand in it like I do and then give yourself a nice thumbprint on this nice canvas that you just spent all the time working on. So dry all parts of it. I use just my regular hair dryer. Make sure it's on the highest setting that it has and the hottest setting that it has. A lot of people want to put the blow dryer on cold because they think it's going to mess up the paint somehow if it gets too hot, but it really won't. Put it all the way up on hot. You can put it right close to the canvas, an inch or so away. Just make sure you don't touch it, and we'll come back when we're dry. And we're back. And I also have rinsed and dried all of my brushes that I've been using, so when we need them, they're ready for us. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to mix up her, let's put this over here. We are going to start to mix up her skin tone, the color for her hat, the color for her shirt, all of the other colors that we're going to need. And so I'm going to take my palette here. And so you don't need this to match your skin tone exactly. The skin tone that I have over here is much peachier than I am, but that's okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a pretty good sized pool of white. Now you don't need that much skin tone, it's just gonna be the bottom of her face and kind of her neck area. So don't make too much, you don't wanna waste it. So we're gonna take our white, take a tiny bit of yellow, don't have any left. And then this is going to sound weird, but we're going to take a touch of red and then a tiny, as small amount as you can get of blue. Because what we're essentially trying to make here is like tan or like a brown. And so to do that, you need all of the primaries. So as little as you can get on this blue. You can always add more, but if you do too much, it's hard to take away. So I have something like this here to mix up with our skin tone. If you have a brown, definitely use that. It'll be a lot easier. If you're working with only primaries like I am, then not to worry. Mixing up a brown is harder than a lot of people think. A lot of people think it's just mixing all of the colors together and you somehow end up with brown. But the ratios need to be right. And so the important thing to know is that when you mix up your brown, often it'll come out leaning towards one of your primaries. So you'll try to mix up a brown and it'll look a little too red, or you try to mix up a brown and like I did, it looks, well, you actually can't tell on the camera, but it's very green. It's almost like it's like a sage green. And so what you're gonna do if your color doesn't come out like the brown that you want, you're going to add whatever primary color is opposite of it on the color wheel. So if my brown is looking a little too green, I'm gonna add some red to correct it. Because what you're essentially trying to do is you're trying to make your color go neutral. And so if you're not super familiar with the color wheel, then you can look that up. Alright, and so that just about fixed mine there. I have kind of like a nice little tan peachy color. It's a little tanner than I am right now, but that's okay. So if you are looking at your brown and it just doesn't come out the first time, don't worry, it virtually never does. So I'll give you another example. If yours comes out, let's say you have a little too much red and too much blue, and your brown comes out looking a little purple, add the opposite of the purple, which would be a little bit of yellow, and that should kind of balance it out. What you're going for is balance. So we're going to take our tan, and what we're going to do is we're going to push over maybe a I don't know, not that much, a pea-sized amount. And we're gonna kind of make a separate little pile over here. And we're gonna take a tiny bit of our black from before. And when I say tiny bit, I mean a tiny, tiny bit, maybe even less than that. Just barely dip into your black and mix it into a small pile of your skin tone. So all we're gonna do is make a little bit of a darker shade of this skin tone so that we can use it. If you look at the painting over there, under the brim of her hat and under her chin, she's got a little shadow, so you can tell where her where the hat's hanging over and where her chin starts. So we're just making a little bit of a darker shade. But you're only going to do one line here and one line here, so you really don't need that much. So I have my regular skin tone and my little bit of a shadowy skin tone. If it comes out looking a little gray because of the black, that's okay. We only need it in that little spot. Alright, gonna rinse this. Now we're gonna start thinking about our, I'll say, decorative colors. And so we need to choose one color for her hat and one color for her clothing. And so I chose to do kind of like a peachy color for her hat and a nice dark purple for her dress. Let me move these so you can see. So you can do whatever color combination you want. I would try to stay away from a light blue hat. I know it would look so nice, but it might disappear into the sky that you have. So what I find is that opposites work really well. Again, we were talking about opposites before on the color wheel. So if you did let's say you want to give her a nice blue dress, if you gave her like a nice light yellow hat, or purple and yellow would look nice, green and pink, because it's kind of like green and red, they're kind of like opposites. So contrasting colors are going to look really nice against each other. It's going to make them both pop. But you can use whatever colors you want. If you don't have a red, or if you don't have blue, if you don't have yellow, if you don't have any of those colors, use whatever you have to make whatever you can. If you are really limited on your colors, you can always do her hat one shade of a color and her dress another shade of the color. So if you wanted to do like a really, really dark purple dress, you could always do a really, really light purple hat, and that's going to be different enough that you're going to be able to, one's going to kind of fall back and one's going to push forward visually, so not to worry if you're a little bit limited on colors. If that's the case, you definitely want to take advantage of your black and your white. So I would definitely, when you're doing your dark color, really push that dark color by adding some black to it. If you're going to do the light color, really, really add a lot of white to it, and you're going to essentially have two totally different colors. So what we're going to do, we're going to take one of our small brushes, doesn't matter the shape, just a little guy. We're going to start outlining. So what we're going to do is we're going to take just a little tiny bit of this skin tone. These are just outlines, so don't worry about the precision of this line. If it is kind of jagged, that doesn't matter. If you skip places, it doesn't matter. Also, don't use a lot of paint on this. It's going to be just a quick outline to show us kind of where we're going, because we don't want to have to freehand that. It's kind of a lot. So we're just in the planning stage now, so don't worry about the niceness of your lines. Doesn't matter. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the shape of her hat. We're going to kind of build up and down from there. And so the brim of her hat on the outsides is kind of like a football shape. If you look at the top brim of her hat and the bottom, it kind of makes it's like, oh, I can't do that with my hands. Kind of a football shape. So that's what we're going to go for too. You want to, I'll say, keep this within the boundaries of the page. If it hangs off a little bit on your right side, no big deal. But you definitely want to be able to see all of that hat, because that's our main focal point here. And we're going to take a lot of time making it nice and pretty, so get it in that frame. And so what you want to do is not put it straight on. You want to have it at a little bit of an angle so that it kind of looks like she's tilting her head. It's a lot more dynamic than if it was straight on, because then you have your straight building, your straight hat. You want to give it a little bit of variety. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a dot over here. Maybe that's where I want the hat to start. And a dot over here. Maybe that's where I want it to end. It's just a guesstimate at this point. It's okay. It's not super precise. And then we're going to make our football shape. So we're going to come down and up. All right. Now, if you have to do what I did here, where it's like I made one line, it was way too shallow, so I came up and made a second line, you can totally do that because all of this is going to be filled in. You're not going to see any of this. This is the time to get the shape right, to get your angles and your look and stuff right, and then we're going to totally fill in. So no big deal if you have to go back over these lines. That's what this step is for. Now on top, we're going to make the top part of the hat where her head kind of sits in there. And so it doesn't come, it's going to come down off the top. It's going to curve a little bit like this. You don't need to make that line. I'm just showing you where it's going to go. So don't sit it too tall, I'll say. Have it be a little shallower of a circle because you can always make it bigger. It's hard to make it smaller once you put it on there. So we got our top of our hat. And now right under that, we're going to have her chin is going to rest somewhere around this bottom line that we made, the back brim of her hat. It's kind of where her chin is going to come from. So underneath this, we're going to draw her chin. Again, the lines don't need to be nice and perfect. We're just in the planning stage. We're going to do her neck. And what I would say is make her neck a little skinnier than you think a realistic neck would look. Because what happens when you're doing figures, especially one that's pretty stylized like the one we're doing, if you do her neck or a more realistic width, it's going to look too big for some reason. So just make it skinny. You can always make it wider, but if it's too skinny, it will look better than if it is too wide. So start small, get bigger as you go. So we're going to start at the top here, right under her chin, maybe an inch apart. We're going to come down and flare out. So my neck is probably maybe 2 inches long. And then from the shoulder, you're just going to paint down her shoulder. Same thing, don't make her shoulders too wide. If anything, you can always make her shoulders wider, but don't start with them too wide. You definitely don't want them wider than the hat. The hat's kind of supposed to be like this big, exaggerated, floppy, kind of like straw hat. So if you feel like you need to make your hat bigger to accommodate for the shoulder size or the head size that you made, definitely do that. The hat's supposed to be big, so it won't look weird if you do have to make it a little bigger. I think I do have to make mine a touch bigger. Okay, now that we have our shapes roundabout in there, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to make this line before we actually need it. It's kind of a weird shape to get a handle on, so it's easier for me to show you now while we don't have any color on there, because when we go to put our colors on, you're going to want to go quickly with your highlights and your lowlights and things like that, and so trying to figure out that shape while we're putting the color on is kind of a lot. So I'm going to show you how to do that first, just so we can practice. And so the shape of the dip in the front of her hat here is kind of the same shape that you would draw the letter M. So you're going to start, I'll say, at the bottom. So at the bottom of her hat, you're going to go up, down, up, down. And so to kind of show you what that looks like. So in the same way you would make an M, up, down, up, down. You're going to do the same thing with our hat, except it's going to be a lot more fluid. So you're going to start at what I'll say is the bottom again. You're going to go up, down, up, down. So see, yeah, that's kind of like an elongated M. And so if you can imagine this on the hat, it looks something like that. So our hat kind of looks like that. It's even a little less exaggerated than that. But that's essentially what's going to be like. So again, like an M, we're going to go up, down, up, down. This dip is going to be in the middle. So you're going to start down at the bottom where your corner of your football shape is. You're going to scoop up a little bit. The middle is going to dip down to be that part that's covering her face. It's going to scoop up again and then come down to meet this corner. All right. And so I'll show you what that's going to look like on here, but again, we're going to paint right over it. So if you do want to practice this line a little bit, then you can do that now without worrying about whether you're going to see it later or not. So we're going to start in this corner. We're going to go up, down. This is the part that's going to cover her face. So we went up, down. We're going to go up and then down to meet the corner. Up, down, up, down. All right, you can kind of see where that's going to come together there. This maybe even be a little wider. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start to mix the colors that we want for our hat and for our dress. And maybe I'll do something different in this one than I did in that one. If you want to do something like that, the peachy color is going to be, a majority of it's going to be white. You're going to do a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. If it comes out too orange, then do a little bit more yellow. That's what will bring it from like kind of neutral orange to like a peachy color. A little more yellow, a little more white if you're looking for that salmony peach color. The dark purple on her dress is going to be just blue and red. If you want it even darker, like a real like Merlot type purple, you can add a tiny bit of black. Again, be so careful with the black paint because it really dominates the color. So if you want to do that, you can. As far as purples go, I think I'm going to do her hat a light purple, and I'll do her dress different color. But for the light purples, a purple that has more red in it, so the ratio red to blue, purple that has a little bit more red in it is going to look a little bit more like a grape color, and a purple that has a little bit more blue is going to look a little more lavendery. So if you're looking for a certain type of purple, then it can go either way. So if you try to mix one and it comes out not like the type that you're looking for, then try to add either a little more red or a little more blue depending on what you want. A majority of it though is going to be white if you're looking for a light purple. You're just going to put a touch of each of the colors in. You can always add more, but what you don't want to end up with is a big glob of like real dark purple and you were looking for just like a nice light like pastel purple. So I think I'm going to do for her hat. So for her hat, since I have the sky blue here that we used for this background, I might just use that to make my purple. And I'll use a little red too. And I'll kind of show you the ratios that I'm using here, just so you have an idea. So in this whole pile of white, you can see it's a pretty big pile. I put that much red, and that might even be too much. So you really want to go pretty sparingly with the colors at first. to get those light pastels, you really want 90% of it to be white. Alright, got a beautiful light purple here. Might be hard to see down there. Alright, so we have one, maybe two more important colors to mix up. We're going to decide now what color we are going to want to do her dress. To go with my light purple, I might give her a maybe I'll reverse the colors from this painting. So I'll give her a purple hat and kind of like an orangey colored dress. So to do that, some red. Yellow. And a little bit of white. Alright, got an orange there. That would go nice with the purple. What I'm going to do is, if you want to try experimenting with colors, highly recommend. Again, another advantage of doing this kind of online class is that you are the only one there. You don't have to worry about messing up. You can always paint over what you did, start over, no big deal. You have an unlimited amount of time. You have all the resources, to yourself. And so try some things out that maybe you might not try within the constraints of the class. Alright, so I've got my dress color, hat color, skin tone, darker skin tone. Clean my brushes. And so the last kind of important color that we do right now is her hair color. I have a really dark brown over there. It's kind of like my hair. If you want to do black hair, that would look nice too. It would just be important that we do those highlights because this background is black. If you're doing blonde, a yellow will work perfectly. Again, it would be really hard to match what a blonde hair actually looks like in a not stylized way. So if you just want to use some yellow, that's fine. If you want to tone down the yellow a little bit from being like super bright yellow, you can mix some yellow with the skin tone that you have. If you're going for like a blonde, a more natural blonde than just a plain yellow, mix a little bit of white into it too. That'll kind of soften it a little bit if you want to go for blonde. If you want to do kind of like a orange hair, without looking like too bright orange, you can, let's see, if you make a natural looking red hair color. So you would take your red and your yellow and you would make a regular kind of plain primary orange, and you would do kind of what we did with the skin tone, and you would put the ever so smallest drop of blue in it. And so what that's going to kind of do is, I'll say, neutralize it. It's going to start bringing it closer to the neutral zone of that spectrum, and you'll get kind of like a toned down orange, so it's not like crazy bright. So let's tackle brown right now. So I'm going to do a similar thing that I did with the skin tone. I'm going to mix a little blue, a little red, and some yellow to try to make a brown. I might have to add some black into it to make it as dark as my hair, as dark as I did over there. Okay, so if you can see that again, this happened when I mixed up my skin tone too. It went like way too green. So to the green, I'm going to add a little bit of red, and hopefully that'll balance that out. And there we go. We ended up with a nice kind of chocolate brown. Pretty close. A little lighter than my color, but that's okay. Alright. And so now we have all of our colors on standby. So now it's just about filling it in. I'm going to rinse out all my brushes. It might seem like I'm using a lot of brushes here, but they really are, a lot of them are the same. I just get lazy and don't like to clean my brushes out, so if you do have to rinse out, if you only have like one medium, one small, one large brush, and you do have to rinse them out every time, that's okay. That's what you probably should do. So like I said before, we're generally going to move from the background to the foreground. So if we think about our figure here, and what is the thing that is farthest in the background, it would be the very back underneath part of her hat. Then we would see her hair, then her skin, then her dress, then the front of her hat. But what we're going to do, just so it's easier, we don't want to have to do the back of her hat, then everything else, then the front of her hat. That would be a lot of unnecessary steps. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of ignore the back of the hat until we do the front of the hat. So the steps that we're going to take are, we're going to do her hair first, then we're going to do her skin tone, we're going to do her hat and her dress last. Alright, so we're going to take our hair color, whatever color you came up with. Again, if you're still mixing colors, take a time right now, pause, come back when you're ready with all your colors. And we're going to paint in our hair, and the hair is kind of stylized again, so no need to do any little brush strokes, any individual hairs, anything like that. I kind of did mine in, I don't know, like long curls on the side here, and I came in with the highlights after, so don't worry about any of those highlights. We're just putting in kind of a block of color. If you want to do like a little updo like this on the side, you can have just a little kind of swirl of brown coming out of the side, or whatever hair color you chose. If you want to have nice long hair, it certainly can drape over her shoulder more than I did it. If you want it on both sides of her neck, you can go on both sides. There are a few rules here, so whatever you want your figure to look like, you could certainly do that. And so the hair is going to start out of the top of where the hat is. So here, skate along her face, and now her skin is going to overlap where we put the hair a little bit. So don't worry about following this face line super gently, because we can fix if we overlap a little bit. Alright, so I decided to give her longer hair this time. And so this is also a good time to note that if you're using a lighter color, that doesn't cover this background black so easily. So if you're using like a blonde or like a white, a gray, anything like that for the hair, and you paint it on and it's really see-through, what you want to do is do 1 or 2 layers, stop, hit it with the blow dryer, do another layer, and do that as many times as you need to so that it's not see-through anymore. So you can take as many layers on that as you really need to. Mine is pretty dark brown, so it's pretty good with just the first pass. So we're just going to leave that the way it is. If you have any big globs of your hair color that comes right along the face where we're going to paint her face and her neck, I would say stop and blow dry that a little bit now, because if your skin tone is light and your hair is dark, when you're painting that skin tone right next to the hair, you don't want it to pull any of that dark color in. You're going to have a big like dark spot on the side of your face. If your skin tone is darker, if it matches the hair, or if it's similar, then don't worry about it. But if you want to give that a little blow dry, you can do that. So you can either rinse off that brush that you were using, or if you have another medium-sized brush, you can grab this one. We're going to start to do her face and her shoulders. And so you're going to take that skin tone that you mixed up earlier. You're going to take the lighter skin tone. That little tiny bit of darker skin tone that we mixed up before is going to come afterwards. And so we're just going to fill in her face and her neck, her shoulder. Let's do the whole shoulders for now so we can kind of decide what we want to do with her dress later. So everything from here down out to her shoulders is going to be painted in with our skin tone. The same thing that I said before with the hair. Up on this line here, you don't have to worry about being too neat there because we're going to have the hat color come down to meet that line. So don't spend all your time trying to get that in a nice perfect line. So if you have some bare spots like here, that you need to go back and do a second coat, you can definitely do that. Either just give it a minute or two to dry, or you can hit it lightly with a blow dryer. But you definitely want to make sure that you're going in to do that second coat because we do need this paint wet to do the shadow lines. So if your paint is just wet and it's not transparent, then just leave it as it is while we go on to the next step. But if you have some spots that you want filled in before we start to do those shadow areas, then you can blow dry and do a second layer. Now that we have both coats of our skin tone in there, we're going to take the same brush and we're not going to rinse it, we're just going to wipe it off a little bit onto a paper towel just so you get most of the paint off. And we're going to come in with that darker skin tone that we made. That was just mixing a little bit of black into the skin tone that we made before. I'm going to take just a tiny bit of that, not a ton. And we're going to start to put the shadows underneath her chin and on the top of her head where that hat is going to kind of hang down. So we're going to take a little of that darker tone. We're going to draw a line under her chin. And since her skin, her chin, and her neck is still wet, this darker tone should be able to blend in pretty easily with what we already have. See, she's got a little bit of shadow there. This is also where you might notice that if you didn't add quite enough black to your original darker skin tone, then you can certainly adjust that color and add a little bit more at this point. And the reason you want the paint underneath her chin to be a little bit wet is so that it will blend nice and easily, so you won't be left with just like a harsh dark line underneath her chin. And so we're going to do the same thing on the top of her head. So right here where the rim of her hat is going to fall. And it's going to look a little funny when we do it now because it's going to look like you're just drawing a dark line across her, I guess it would be kind of across her mouth or where her nose is. But it will look normal once we put the hat on, so don't worry about it. We're going to do the very same thing that we did down here under her chin. I'm just going to come right under here. And now this one can be a little bit more blunt than maybe the shadow underneath her chin because shadows have beginnings and endings. So if it's only shading right underneath her eyes and that's it, it doesn't need to blend down as much. Okay, we're gonna start to go in with our hat color. So mine's gonna be that light purple. And so the most important thing that we're gonna do here is that we're really gonna be working with our whatever hat color we chose and white. And so the white is going to be really important in differentiating between what is this kind of back part of her hat and what is the front part that's coming over. Because what we're going to do is we're going to paint the whole thing whatever color we chose, and we're going to have to fill in that kind of wavy M line that we made before, just with our highlight. We're going to use the outlines, the dark black and purple that you see on there later, but for right now, the only way we're going to see that line is with our highlights, with our white. So I'm going to grab my hat color, load up my brush, and we're going to fill all that hat area in. Don't worry about leaving the lines open, fill it in totally. And now if you need to switch to one of your smaller brushes, if you either have this detail brush or if you have like an angled brush like this to get in those corners, you can definitely use that if you don't feel as confident doing that with your big brush. And I'll say the same thing for the hat that I said for the skin tone. If you kind of have some patchy spots, like I definitely have down here in the black building area because my hat is such a light color, if you feel like you need to do 2 coats, you can certainly do that. Just make sure, again, on that second coat that you do have wet, you leave the hat wet so that we can mix in our highlight colors. Because you don't want to be doing the wet highlights onto dry paint because then they're not going to blend as well. So if you need to give it a quick dry, you can feel free to do that. Or by the time you paint the whole thing, like I can probably go in now and do a second coat and it will cover better. Acrylics dry pretty fast. Now that we have our hat filled in, we're going to take the same brush. We're not going to rinse it. We're just going to kind of wipe all the extra paint off here. Wipe it on your paper towel if you need. Squish some of that extra out. And we're going to take some plain white. And we're going to do our highlights. And now if you want to get really creative, you certainly can do your highlights in another color. You don't have to do them in white. I have this kind of lilac-y purple hat here. So if I wanted to do my highlights in, say, a red or a blue, that would look really nice. I would stay away from black because it's going to maybe black or brown because that would kind of muddy up the bright, nice colors that we have here. But if you wanted to try another color to do your highlights with, you're going to do them in all the same spots that we're going to do them in. But yours is going to be a little bit more colorful, have a little more dimension. So that might be fun if you wanted to try that. Again, this is kind of like a personal class, so try some things out. So we're going to take the same brush, not too much white, that might be a little too much. And we're going to be creating that M shape, like I talked about before, with our white as our highlight. And so you can kind of see it on that girl over there. I'll start over here. So we're going to go up, down, up, down. Just working that white in. Along this edge. You see how that front of her hat is kind of coming into the foreground now. The back of her hat is kind of receding into the background. So we're going to do some highlights also on this top part of her hat. We're going to curve around this right side so that it gives it a little bit of dimension. It's going to show the roundness of her hat. And then we're going to do it also underneath here. So we're going to come corner to corner. And we're going to give her a little roundness here too. So remember, I kind of painted that line when we were doing just the outline. So now we're kind of bringing it back. So while our hat is drying a little bit, we'll change gears. Clean our brush. Down to her dress. And now, like our hat, you have a lot of, and her hair, you have a lot of leeway when it comes to her dress. I did kind of like a one shoulder thing over here because I just thought that that was the easiest thing. But you can do a lot of things. So my dress over here kind of just does an angle like this, but you could always do one straight across too, kind of like an off the shoulder dress. You could do just two if you're confident in doing real thin lines. You could do just two straight lines down without anything else. It'll kind of look like she has a little spaghetti strap dress on. If you want to cover the whole thing up to like a tight neckline here, you can do that, paint her whole shoulders. If you want to do a little V-neck, you can do that. Possibilities are endless. I thought that this was the easy one because it was just a straight diagonal line. It makes it look a lot fancier than it really is because, you know, like you have a little one strap or a little one shoulder dress there. But as far as painting, it's definitely one of the easier ones to do. So I'm going to take my dress color. I think I'm going to give her the same little one strap or one shoulder. Alright, so I'm going to dip across like that. I'm just going to paint this side in. Easy. Now she has a dress. And so I don't have to worry about this little piece of her shoulder over here because I think that would cut down, but don't forget about if you do have a little piece of shoulder sticking out of her hair there and your dress does go all the way across, don't forget about that little piece over there. All right. We are going to rinse again. We're almost there. All right. At this point, I'll say we'll give it a little blow dry just to make sure everything has at least a little tackiness. We don't want anything super wet for this next part. We're going to be going in with some of the deeper highlights. We're going to do maybe some of the little fancy stuff on her hat, little swirls in her hair. We'll give her some jewelry, and we'll do some general outlining. So you don't want anything with big globs of paint, so especially near edges of your shapes where the paint tends to like beat up, make sure you get all those spots dry. If you have like a really big, try to see where I have some. I don't know if you can see here, kind of next to her neck, I have kind of some thicker areas. You can actually see them reflecting right there too. If they are too big and you don't feel like they're drying with the blow dryer, take your brush and brush over them, flatten them out a little bit, or else you're going to be sitting there with the blow dryer for a long time. You're going to have to be waiting like an hour or two for them to dry. So smooth out any big globs that you have. And so we'll come back with a dry, totally dry canvas. So now's the time that if you have used your small brush, we're going to dry it off, wash it, dry it. Now you can use any variety of brush that you have for this. It can be round or flat, doesn't really matter. Anything in this kind of region. If you have like a kid's little watercolor brush, use that. I use these all the time. Anything on the smaller side, we're going to be doing some of her jewelry and the little details in her hair and things like that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start accessorizing her. I'm going to put a little bit of jewelry on there. I always associate pearls with the derby for some reason, the big hats and the pearls. I don't know if that's just a me thing or if that's a general thing. So I just put a little pearl necklace on her and some pearl earrings. Also, I wear these all the time, so thought it kind of was a nod to myself. But you can put any kind of jewelry on her that you want. If you have like a favorite necklace, you can feel free to put that on her. If you have, a lot of people like hoop earrings. If you have some nice fancy dangly earrings that you like, you can put those on her. Whatever you want, doesn't have to be you. If you don't want any jewelry on her, you don't have to put any jewelry on her. In the same way that we put those flowers on her hat, if you want her dress to have some flowers or some bows or something, you can do those on her dress as well. You don't necessarily just have to have the jewelry, but that's what I chose to do. I'm a huge proponent of people kind of taking things in your own direction, so the details, I'm going to say from now on, whatever you think looks best on your canvas, with your colors, with your shapes, with your choices, go for it. And so I've been trying to anticipate questions that you guys might have. Like I said, I've been teaching these classes. I feel like I generally know what people are going to ask. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the Facebook comments and I'll try to answer them. But my general answer will probably be don't be afraid if you're looking to try something different, or does this color go with this color, or anything like that. I would say go ahead and try it. If you have any technical questions, let me know. I can definitely answer those for you. But I'm going to go ahead and throw some earrings on her. And so the pearls are really easy. They have that little tiny highlight in them that I put over there, but that's going to come after. We're not going to worry about that now. All we're going to be doing is making some white circles. Easy, right? So for her earrings, I would say you can have them up as far as like that top rim of her hat. You can put them down a little bit farther from her hat if you want, but don't go too low with these earrings. She doesn't have ears. Again, it's a stylized person, but you don't want them unrealistically low. As long as they're even on both sides, they should be okay. Relatively even. Remember, her head is kind of tilted a little bit, so if anything, if you're one on your right, a little bit higher than the one on your left, it's better than the one on the left being higher. And try, you're going to get them as close as you can get them to each other. Don't worry if they're not exactly the same size. They're not perfect circles. It's totally okay. I promise that mine are not perfect circles, but from this distance, they look like they're pretty close. But no need to spend 10 minutes trying to make these perfect circles. Same thing with the necklace. With the necklace too, something that I didn't do over here, which is why her necklace is kind of wonky, I suggest making your bottom pearl first, then doing the two on the sides, and doing one on each side until you come down to that center pearl. Because what I did is I started on my left side and I was going with the pearls, and then I realized that I was going to end in a weird spot, like way over on her shoulder, so I had to kind of bring it back in. So try to kind of do them periodically so you get the shape of the necklace, and then fill in the pearls in between so you don't kind of go way off. It's hard to predict where they're going to go. If her jewelry comes off the bottom of the canvas here, no big deal. If you want to give her like long pearls that kind of go way down, that's fine. I think that's what I'm going to do. Alright, and so it looks like I'm only going to have one side of my pearls because the other side would kind of come up here underneath her hair, so I don't have to worry about that whole other side. If you feel like you need to do a second pass with your white to get those pearls to be really opaque, you can certainly do that. The transparency of your white usually depends on the quality of the paint that you have. That's not to say that you have bad quality paint if your white's really transparent, but if you have like kids paint or like just regular craft paint, it's usually not as pigmented as like a professional level paint, and mine is not professional level paint. Pretty sure it's just craft paint. So no harm in if you have to go over a second time. Like I said, we've got all the time in the world. So do as many layers as you feel like you need. to get those nice bright white pearls. And you can always leave these for now. Go ahead and move on and do some other details. And then come back and fill them in again if you need to. You don't have to wait for each individual element to dry and then go back and do them. I'm going to rinse this guy. Alright, so here is going to be the fun part. I'm going to start to put on some of the highlights. So if you see in our master copy over there, the highlights are some of the most important things on here. It's what brings it from this, which is a relatively flat painting, to this, which has some really bold outlines, and it really kind of makes all the elements pop. And so the outlines on the buildings here are going to be really important. The outlines on her shoulders here, her earrings, her hair has some kind of crazy highlights, and on her hat are really going to put the distinguishing features of the painting in. And so we're going to start to work on those. So again, I rinsed off this small brush that I was just using. I'm going to keep using it. We'll start on the buildings. Those are the easy ones. We'll grab some white. Just a little bit of white. And if you do have a round brush like this, and you want to get nice thin lines, what I would do is take your brush, dip in your paint, and you're going to kind of roll it on your, whatever you're keeping your paint on, like this. And that's going to kind of gather the bristles into a nice point, where if you just dipped it in, it kind of makes the bristles splay out. Alright, so we're going to come on the right side of these spires, and we're going to put, I'll say, a broken outline. And so you don't need to go all the way from the top and draw a line all the way down here. Don't worry about pulling a super long, super straight, super thin line. We don't need to do that. We're doing just little pieces that are going to highlight the edges of these buildings. And so yours don't need to be exactly where mine are. I'll do some of mine a little differently than I did over there, just to kind of show you that anything goes over here, as long as you're staying on the same side of the buildings. So if you're doing your highlights on your right side of this building, keep them on your right side of this building. Don't go on the right side over here and the left side over here. I mean, it won't ruin the whole thing if you do, but it's better to keep them consistent. Maybe we'll do one over here. And our buildings continue to over here on this right side also. So maybe I'll throw in here. Because why not? Alright. And we're going to do largely the same thing with her hair, with her hat, with her shoulders, with her face. We're just going to use different colors. And so if you have some of this white, you can certainly take this white and do some highlights. You can do like one on her shoulder, give her one on this shoulder. You can do some in her hat. You want to do one down here, here. And so, like I said before, you don't necessarily need to put yours in the same spot that I'm putting mine. What you want to do generally, I'll say, is you want your highlights to ride on any edges that we have. So any edges where one color meets another color or one shape meets another shape. So if you look on that copy, I put a highlight on the bottom of her chin here, because that's where the shape of her face meets the shape of her neck. I put a highlight on the edge of her shoulder, because that's where the shape of her shirt meets the shape of this background. So the little highlight kind of helps push them apart. Any of the shapes of her hat, if you feel like those need a little highlight, you can do that. Anywhere where you feel like you need one shape to kind of push away from another shape, you can put a little highlight. We're going to do a similar thing in her hair, because right now her hair just looks like a big blob, and we definitely need some highlights in there. Alright, so I'm going to take my same brush. I just had white on it, so I'm not going to rinse it off. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my skin tone color, probably the darker one, maybe a little bit of both, who knows. I'm going to take my little darker skin tone, and I'm going to use that color for the highlight in her hair. On my original painting over here, I did some in white, and it was just really bright, and it looked kind of funny. So if you have, if you used brown hair, if you have like a lighter brown, you can use the lighter brown. I even used black for some of it in here. I don't know if we'll be able to see up close. Oh yeah, you can see. So these highlights in here are going to be that lighter brown, or the lighter tan that I use for her skin. And I also have some black highlights in there, so you can use either color. You can use both like I did. And again, this is a really stylized painting, so you don't need to be making the little individual hairs on her head. They don't need to be straight. If you look at mine, they're really graphic swirls. So kind of anything goes here. If you want to give her a little wave, give her a little wave. If you want like real tight curly hair, give her tight curly hair. Whatever you think. And now keep in mind, if you do anything that you really don't like, if you have any of that original hair color left over, you can always paint right over it, so don't be nervous when you're putting in these strong highlights. I know it looks kind of funny at first, but if you keep in mind the style that we're going for in the end, it'll seem a little less bizarre to kind of put these really tough highlights and lowlights in. Alright. And so we're going to come in and do some similar ones with our black. So now we're switching from our white to our tan to our black. So I'm going to roll the brush again in my black paint, try to make it as thin as I can. And so these black, I guess lowlights, are going to be the ones that are really going to make things stand out, especially on this background. And so you don't need to place these in any particular area. I generally like one on the chin here so that you can tell the difference where her head and her neck starts. Put one on the side here. And you can definitely overlap them. If you look, I have this big white highlight here. I can put a black one right on top that kind of like doubles it up. Let's see, I can put one on her shirt here. As long as you're kind of sticking to these edges, kind of think about where the outsides of everything are. There's no real right or wrong. You can come down here out of her hat. Alright, she's starting to stand out, right? Alright, so I'm going to take just a little more black. and I put a little black highlight in her earrings to give them a little bit of a shine. If you want to do that, then that's fine. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. I wouldn't do one in every single pearl. If you gave her a necklace made of pearls too, you don't have to put a little highlight in every pearl. That would be a waste of time. So you're going to do a little, I'll say, quarter circle, a little kind of comma shape on each earring. Again, keep it consistent from earring to earring, so don't put one on the right side and one on the left side. Do them both on the right side, kind of skimming along one of those edges, and it'll just give it a little shine. And then we're going to move on. Clean this brush. We're going to keep using the same brush. And this is where, if you really want to get kind of creative with your highlights, this is where you're going to get the opportunity to do so. I'll give you a little example. Let's see. So in my master copy back there, I have a purple dress and a kind of peachy colored hat. And so for one of my highlights on a lot of my highlights on the hat, I took that dark purple and put it into her hat, and it was a really nice highlight. And so I can choose to do the same thing over here. I gave myself a little bit of red because the red might be nice for some of our highlights, especially in this dress here. If I wanted to do a little bit of red, that might look nice. I can do some red in the hat. And this is just random. I'm doing like real thin lines. There's no real rhyme or reason here. We're just kind of playing with colors a little bit. Right. And I could even do the same thing if I wanted to keep going with it, take a little bit of my orange. I can do that. Some of the orange that I used in her dress. And so these highlights are just to bring a little bit of variety. You by no means need to do a ton of them. If you like the way it looks with just a few simple highlights, you can do that. If you really like doing all these different colored highlights, you can do a bunch of them. It'll just make it look a little more poppy. It's really up to you. And so now the only thing we really have left to do, which I think some would argue is the most important part, is the hat decoration. And so I was planning to just leave mine like this when I finished my first copy, and then I thought, this is really boring, this is not what a derby hat would look like. So again, sounding like a broken record, but you can kind of do whatever you want in this space. I did some little rosettes over there, and so we'll teach you how to do those, but if you have like a nice big bow in mind, you could do that. If you just want to do like maybe a ribbon going across, I did a little bit of a similar thing here. You can go ahead and do that. There are a million things that you could do. So really let it be your own and come up with something that is individual to you. If you had a derby hat that you're kind of replicating, then maybe I can help you do that. Just let me know. First of all, let's see. We're going to choose our colors here. And so if you look over here, I used the darker purple that I used in her dress on the roses on her hat. And so I kind of like borrowed the colors, so I made sure that they went together. And so maybe I'll do a similar thing over here. Maybe I'll do some red and orange in her hat since I have red and orange in her dress. Alright. And now depending on the size of your little rosettes here, you can either stick with the small brush that you've been using, or you can rinse off your medium-sized brush. That's the one that's like maybe an inch or smaller, and you can use this. If you want those roses to be real nice and big, definitely use your big brush. At least for one of them, you gotta have one big focal point flower, right? Okay. So I'll show you on here how I do them. So you're going to take your brush and you want to think about maybe the two colors that you want in your rosettes. So I'm going to take some orange and some red on one brush. So you're going to kind of dip one side into one color and dip the other side into the other color. And so to do your roses, you're going to do a series of C's. And so you're just going to build C's from the center. You're going to come out, C, 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 C. And you're going to use both sides of the brush so that each brush stroke has a little bit of red and a little bit of orange in it. So I'll show you what I'm doing. Start with just a dot in the center. So I'm going to turn that dot into a C. And then on the other side, I'll do another C, kind of just doing a series of curves that end up turning into petals. Right? You've got your little rosette. And so it works best if one of your colors is a light color and one of your colors is a dark color. Mine might be a little bit similar. So I could always do, let's see, I could do red and white, because the white will really stand out. So over here, I'll come right on the corner of my hat. And now you can do flowers all the way across the bottom here. You can do them just on this side, just on this side. I thought right in the corner was a nice spot because, you know, you're not taking away from kind of this nice little highlight we did on the bottom. You're just kind of focusing in on one spot. But again, you can go crazy, do as many flowers or little bows and odds and ends as you want. Okay, I can throw some orange in here if I want. Alright, again, we're going stylized here, so there are almost no wrong answers. Maybe I'll do another small one. Maybe I'll do it over here. And the very last thing I'm going to show you here is if you want to do some of these kind of feathery guys. I know a lot of derby hats have those, I know mine did. Or if you just like them, these are really nice because they can get as big and tall as you want. If you want to have one big kind of feather that sticks out the back here as like a nice detail, you can certainly do that. If you want to do just some smaller little feathery details to fill up some space like I did on my copy over there, you can do that. If you want to leave these out altogether, you can certainly do that too. And so these are going to be the same as all our other all of our other elements in that you can do these any color that you want. I might do, maybe I'll do some orange ones and some white ones. But all you want to do is you're going to start from the corners of the flowers. So any edge of the flower, you could start from some up here, some over here, on the bottom, on the sides. They're coming from the flowers, they're kind of jetting out. And so what you don't want to do is a straight line out. You want to give up some little bit of a curve in any direction, as long as you don't send it straight out, because then it's not going to look quite as natural. You want it to flow a little bit, because if you look at those things, they're usually kind of bouncing in the wind. They're not like sticking straight out. So I'm going to take mine here. I'm going to throw some of these any direction. These guys are fun. So this is always it's these parts that I get carried away on. So do a few and then stop and take a look, take a step back, see if you really need 100 of them. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Do as many as you feel like you need. Alright. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'll take a little bit of white, do the same. If they overlap, that's totally okay. They would in real life anyway, so don't worry about leaving room for another color. They're all going to kind of go on top of each other. Alright, I'm already getting carried away. Alright, so that's about it. If you have your little brush, I'm going to give it a little signature at the bottom there. And you're done. You got your derby girl. Alright, so thank you guys so much for logging in and doing this class with me. I've missed it just as much as you guys, maybe more. So if you want to do more of these classes, definitely let the library know, let me know. If you have any ideas, anyone who's ever been in one of my classes before knows that I am open to suggestions. If you have something that you want to paint, drop it in the comments and I will, try to work around that for next month or our next upcoming class. If you need help with anything, again, if you're looking to mix a really specific color, or if you're having trouble with one specific shape, if you have questions about brushes, paint types, canvases, anything like that, I'll be paying attention at the time of the class. So just put it in the comments and I'll try to get you an answer as fast as I can. So thanks again, happy painting, and stay safe.